He ran one of London's most trusted banks. He stole from every client he had. And on the morning they hanged him, he looked like the calmless man in the city.
November 1824, London. A banker.
Which one?
Fauntleroy.
How much?
£170,000. Over 10 years.
And no one noticed?
100,000 people came to watch. Not one of them could explain afterward why it felt nothing like justice.
He was 39. He inherited the bank at 22 when his father died and left him a firm already drowning in debt.
That part I understand.
The stealing part.
The hiding it part, for 10 years. The firm was already in trouble when he took it. Debts from builders, partners who had left. The Bank of England watching, he was 22 years old, and the whole thing was on his shoulders.
The numbers were wrong. Before he touched them, he didn't dig the hole. He just decided not to tell anyone how deep it already was.
He kept a ledger.
Every transaction, every name, in his own handwriting with a footnote explaining why.
That's not what thieves do.
No.
Then what is it?
He wrote it all down in order to keep up the credit of our house. That was the footnote every time, the same sentence for 10 years.
A criminal who documents his crimes is not trying to hide them. He's trying to explain them. To someone. To something. To a version of himself he hasn't met yet.
17 bankers testified for him at the Old Bailey. 17 men who knew him. Said they still trusted him.
Stood up in court after everything.
He wasn't stealing for himself. That was his defense. The jury took 20 minutes.
He had mistresses,
Yes,
properties, a wine cellar.
yes. That would embarrass most kings, yes.
And he still wrote it all down.
The run on the bank started quietly, the way all real disasters start. Not with shouting, with a cue and complete silence. The jury was right. He stole, he lied. He destroyed hundreds of families.
I know. Because it doesn't feel finished, does it? He didn't run. He was arrested at his desk, mid-sentence, writing a letter to a client explaining that their dividend would be delayed this quarter. A man who writes it all down knows he's going to be caught.
Or doesn't care if he is.
Those are two very different things.
September 1824. A family tries to access a trust fund. The account is empty. The transfer order is signed. The signature belongs to the trustee. Except the trustee died 2 years ago.
The forgery was discovered because it was too good. Stroke for stroke, identical. A dying man's hand shakes. His didn't.
He didn't run. When they came for him. Working.
He asked if he could finish the sentence. They said no. He put the pen down, capped the ink, stood up, adjusted his coat.
And then?
And then nothing. They took him.
What was the sentence about?
A letter to a client about a delayed dividend.
He was still doing the job.
Right until the end.
At the Old Bailey, 17 men testified to his character. Bankers, merchants, pillars. 17 people who had trusted him said up they still did after everything.
He pleaded guilty, but argued the money went to the bank, not to himself. The prosecution itemized his wine cellar, his properties, his mistresses. He listened. He didn't object.
Death by hanging. 20 minutes of deliberation.
20 minutes.
For 10 years of fraud. Yes.
That's not a verdict. That's a formality.
They had the ledger in his hinhatting with his footnotes. What are they supposed to do? He made it easy for them.
Yes. He made it very easy. In the weeks before the execution, he received hundreds of letters. Strangers. Mostly women. Asking him to be brave. He answered every one.
His wife visited twice. They had been separated for years. She came anyway. He received her the first time. The second time he sent word, "Don't come back."
He sent her away.
Yes.
Why do you think?
Protection. He didn't want her to see.
That's what you want to think.
He dressed carefully, as though going to the office. He ate nothing. The coffee went cold on the table. They came for him at 7.
A man who sleeps the night before his execution. What does that mean to you?
That he made peace with it.
Or that he was waiting for it? The Bank of England withdrew its credit. Every trust, every account, gone.
They estimated 100,000 people, the largest crowd ever assembled for a public execution in London. They started arriving before dawn.
They weren't there to celebrate. Most had never lost money to him. They came because something about his story refused to sit right, and they needed to see the end of it with their own eyes.
100,000 people for a banker.
They hanged murderers with 30 witnesses and buried him the same afternoon. He wasn't.
Because murderers are understandable. The ledger, if you're stealing, you're not stealing, you don't write it down. You're not stealing, you don't need to.
He walked without assistance. The prison chaplain walked beside him. He thanked the chaplain and asked him to step back. He wanted to walk the last part alone.
3 witnesses recorded the same observation, independently, without comparing notes. He did not look like a man about to die. He looked like a man about to find out something he had been waiting years to confirm.
Find out what?
I don't know.
Yes, you do. You just don't want to say it.
Whether there's something after.
At 8:17 in the morning, the crowd went silent.
They left without speaking. An execution that should have felt like the end of something felt like the beginning.
Collective guilt. They came to watch a man die for doing what every market does, moving money that doesn't exist, the debts that can't be paid. The difference was the signature, his name.
I think they felt recognized, Sommelier did.
And it scared them.
That's not guilt, that's something else. The rumor started that same night, in taverns, in letters. In the spaces between what people had seen and what they could explain.
They said he had survived, that he had slipped a silver tube down his throat, that he was alive somewhere, living under another name, that a man who had forged everything else had also forged his own death.
A silver tube.
Completely baseless. The body was identified, buried.
By whom?
Prison officials, the family.
The family that he had separated from, who he had sent away from Newgate. Hawthorne, a mysterious banker who disappears and started somewhere else.
Hawthorne was a novelist.
Writers don't use dead men's names by accident.
He was buried at Bunhill Fields, family vault. His wife did not attend. 2 gravediggers and a prison chaplain who filed Toulon report afterward.
The rumor said the body in the vault was not his. That a silver tube, correctly placed, can prevent strangulation. The rumor was specific. Specific rumors don't come from nothing.
The body was examined, witnessed, buried.
By people who had reason to want it to be over.
That's not evidence of anything.
Neither is the tube.
So we're even.
You're certain he's dead? I'm not certain of anything.
Paris, Naples, Zurich. 3 separate years. All describe the same dead man.
People see what they need to see. The odds are excellent.
For 1 sighting, yes. For 3?
Still excellent.
Henry Fauntleroy died in 1824, hanged. That is the historical record.
What happened after is where the record ends and everything else begins.
A man who spent 10 years making things appear to be what they weren't. Of course, his death generates the same question his life did. Is this real, or is this another forgery?
That's the most interesting thing you've said all night.
It's not a compliment to him.
I know. 3 families hired investigators, not to recover the money. The money was gone, to confirm he was dead. The investigators concluded the same thing. Why do you think they rejected it?
Because they needed him alive to be angry at someone. Dead men can't be confronted.
Or because the report was wrong?
3 independent investigators.
All hired by people who had been told their money was safe.
Whatever he was, criminal, ghost, or something in between, the families he destroyed remain destroyed. That part is not a mystery. That part is just damage.
Man who documents his own crimes in his own handwriting is not hiding. He's leaving something behind for someone or for himself.
I don't know.
A sommelier spending his retirement on dead men's ledgers.
I never retired. I just changed cellars.